My name is Björn and I will be your host tonight. Today's webinar is about secure software development, and this is a broad subject, so we have two speakers who will explain more in detail later on. So let me go through the agenda of tonight. We will be watching an introduction by our current chapter president, Henk, and this will also be his last meeting with us as a president. Henk will be leaving us after this presidentship for over 6 years, I think, and his place will be taken by Brenda. And from my spot from here, I wish you a warm welcome as a president, Brenda. After the introduction, we will start with the presentations of today's webinar. Our two speakers are Rob van der Veer and Martin Knobloch, and they will both introduce themselves in their respective speaking slot. Again, if you have a specific question, can you please post those in the Q&A, and I will take these questions for after the event. Both speakers have asked to take the Q&A sessions to the end of the evening to keep the flow in the speeches. So without further ado, let me start by sharing Henk's video, after which I will be back with you.
Goedenavond. Good evening. Vanavond adresseer ik u vooral in het Engels. Tonight I will be addressing you in English. Daar is een eenvoudige reden voor. Niet dat er iets mis is met ons Nederlands, maar vanavond is er een internationaal gezelschap dat komt luisteren naar onze lezingen. There's nothing wrong with Dutch, of course, but there is an international group of people that will be attending tonight. Daarom dus in het Engels verder. So I will be continuing in English. The chapter is doing quite well. Actually, we have been struggling, as everybody has been struggling, with COVID. But we seem to be able to organize in real-life events this year. If all goes well, we expect to have the first real event, as in people meeting people, somewhere in June. Let's hope and pray we will be successful. Now then, for the general overview of the chapter.
The Dutch chapter has been a meeting place for information security professionals for about 5 years now. We welcome people with or without IC2 certification. We try to promote awareness of information security in society, but we also try to promote IC2 certification. So, for those of you that aren't certified yet, ask for help. We will try to help you as best as we can. The pandemic has forced us into virtualization last year. However, these virtual events also have their advantages. Hence, the board has decided to continue the virtual events, combined with, of course, as soon as possible, in real-life events. 2022 will also bring us some board changes. We will have a new president and we will have a new secretary. A full report will be made next time. I'm very happy to report that the chapter is still growing. Last time I reported 1,000 registries. Now I can report that we have grown again. We are now with 1,026 registries, 30 more than last time. In case you may wonder how it is that we have a growth of 30 people and only 26 more registries, well, people also leave the chapter, for example, because they are retired. I'm also very happy to report that most of our registries are IC2 members, so fully certified. The following members wear the badge of honor: Rosita Korthuis, Mike Talen, Erik Nieuwland, Mark Tissink, Björn Lenen, Paul Oor, Corro Jelle, Paul Peursem and Ronald van Erven. Thank you very much for your contributions. We would like to thank our friends and sponsors, Arrow, Montauban and IBM. We would also like to thank Zoom for sponsoring today's event. Society seems to resume its normal course again. However, please stay healthy, stay safe. We aren't there yet. And now for tonight's program. We have two excellent speakers that will tell you many interesting things about software development and software security. I hope you will have a nice evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again this year. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you, Henk. or Virtual Hank, for this introduction. And I'm still humbly amazed to hear that we are growing with such large numbers. And I hope to meet you in person rather sooner than later. So the first speaker of tonight is Rob van der Veer. And the subject of his presentation is secure software development, lessons from across the globe. Rob, would you be please so kind to turn on your webcam and audio and take the stage and share your presentation?
Yes, I should be live and visible. Thank you. First of all, a message to Brenda, who I know very well, as we've worked closely together. Congratulations to becoming president. I'm sure it will be a success. And thank you, ISC2, for having Martin and me here today to talk about secure software development. In this session, I would like to share with you some experiences while working with clients and doing research. And first, I will go into the story of how software security typically evolves in organizations in order to highlight some of the pitfalls and how to deal with them. And you will see that it is actually a love story, by the way. Then I will discuss the most important lessons as building blocks for success. After that, Martin will take over, followed by room for questions with Martin and me. You ready? Let's go. First, let's start with a little introduction. Hello, I'm Rob. I like to build bridges. I do this in organizations and in the fields of security and artificial intelligence. I work for a software improvement group, SIG, where I started the security practice about 9 years ago. If you don't know us, SIG measures software quality, maintainability, security, privacy, and more to help organizations to get software right. We advise them, we guide them, and if they want, we can provide our platform to analyze and control software quality. Apart from SIG, I'm also involved in several initiatives to help grow these fields. I'm the chairman of the Grip on Secure Software Development Standard. I advise the European Commission. I'm an active contributor to standards at ISO and work for OWASP, part of SAM, co-leader of the integration project at OWASP and founding father of OpenCRISI.org. Now you may wonder why I do all these things, and the answer is simple. I'd like to earn CPE credits, of course, for my CSSLP. So let's go and have a look at the phases organizations go through with secure software development. It's a story that starts with development manager Elizabeth. In the beginning, there was nothing. This is security maturity stage 1. Elizabeth is building software and basically just hopes that it's secure. But she doesn't know. There's no security testing, no review, no tools. And then one day, a man comes along called Darcy. Hello, Mr. Darcy. And when their eyes lock, Darcy blushes and Elizabeth's heart skips a beat. Then, in a strict voice, he suddenly tells Elizabeth that there has been a scary data breach, and from now on, security needs to be tested, which brings them to maturity stage 2. They start testing. They look for some tools together to do network scanning and some automated testing of the application. And they quickly find that it's a good idea to have actual hackers try to break into their system. We call this manual penetration testing mostly. And this provides them with some good insights, definitely. However, over time, they learn it is a pitfall to rely on tests only. Pen tests are useful, but they can only be done very late in the development phase. And they only find part of the issues. Here you see a computer system visualized as a bank building. Penetration testing is about trying to get in from the outside, but because you're not investigating the inside, you can miss a lot of things. For example, that the safe door is actually open, or that passwords are stored unencrypted. Because you can't break into the system now, you don't see these issues. But the best thing to do is to assume that at some point people will break in. And that's when you need security to be really built in your system. So pen testing is useful, but we also need to realize that you can't see everything and also that you can't try everything. A pen test is a time box in which hackers try different things to break in. And when the time is up, they have not run out of options, just out of time. So Elizabeth and Darcy have a problem now that I call the test-only gap. First of all, like I said, tests miss many things. Personal data leaks, sent unprotected to another system, logging is missing, all stuff under the hood that is wrong and presents a weakness. But there's more. Also, because it's late, these tests, Elizabeth needs to fix the found issues once the system is already done. And it's a lot of rework. She has to change all locations where database queries were built to prevent SQL injection. Her boss is not happy because that rework is typically expensive. Why didn't she do it right in the first place? Now Elizabeth is stressed because she needs to release, so she rushes the fixes as best as she can, and unfortunately makes some mistakes along the way. And also, part of the work is postponed for later. The result is that the software is not secure. Too much effort is spent. Both Darcy and Elizabeth are frustrated. They realize they need to get it right at the start. And this is a growing realization, not just with developers, but in the market. We definitely see this. You are increasingly expected to build security in from the start, called security by design sometimes, shifting left. There are also regulations that require it, the GDPR, for example, the bio government security standard in the Netherlands, the payment card industry security standard. And if you don't, you're going to pay a larger price if a breach reveals the engineering was bad. Look at Zoom. The reason that they faced so much criticism is not per se the fact that there were security issues, it's the severity of those issues and the negligence of the development teams. In the meantime, by the way, they have improved their approach. So Elizabeth and Darcy have more than enough reasons to work closer together to build security in for shifting left, starting early and seriously with security in the software development process. It's today's best practice and increasingly regarded as duty of care. But how do you make it work? Spoiler, it's not easy. It's just like with love. We all need it, but it's never easy. And that leads us to maturity stage 3. They start building security in. Great. How to start? Well, Darcy came up with an idea. He presents Elizabeth with long lists of security requirements, some books with coding guidelines, and some training for the developers. Elizabeth appreciates the idea. However, after some time, developers are still making mistakes, despite all those instructions. They got the books on their desks, and Darcy put 400 security criteria on the wiki, a lot of work, but they still make mistakes. Turns out there's too much to remember, and they're only human, of course. But Darcy has an idea. He proposes to start applying threat modeling. Let Elizabeth discuss with her team what could go wrong. With a whiteboard in a room, think about things that could happen, threats to their system, looking at the architecture, and then decide what to do against it. That will create the right requirements automatically. It sounds nice. However, Elizabeth notices that she and her team come up with some useful threats, but Darcy finds they miss a lot of the issues. And then when Darcy joins a threat modeling session to see how it's going and to show them how it's done, he notices that even he misses a number of important things. They conclude that threat modeling is useful for the team to understand the security of the system better, and it can help to identify some additional requirements, but for the most part, the hygiene approach is more effective. And with hygiene approach, I mean the long list of requirements of things that you need to do to gain secure software, like wash your hands before you eat food. So people are not perfect, and neither is threat modeling. Slightly disillusioned, Darcy and Elizabeth conclude that the work of the teams need to be checked while they are developing. So during developing, the feedback loop, which brings them to the next maturity stage. Maturity 4. They download and buy some tools to scan the code and to detect weaknesses as developers introduce them. Some tools for maintainability, to measure code quality, because complexity is actually one of the main enemies of security. Tools to scan for open source vulnerabilities. Mostly they are called software composition analysis tools, well, at least the analysts call them that way. Sometimes you see them called dependency management tools. It has to do with the software bill of material, the the famous SBOM. And of course, statical analysis of code tools, also called SAST tools, maybe different ones for different technologies. But then they have the tools, they're installed, but Elizabeth's team is a bit hesitant to start using them. And they are somewhat overwhelmed by all the output that comes out of it. Some first efforts show that there were useful findings, but Elizabeth and Darcy are really struggling to make it really work in practice. Adoption seems to fail. Having tools is one thing, making people use them effectively is another. They suffer from the so-called tool gap, which brings them to maturity stage 5. You see, the tools are nice, but they miss a large part of the weaknesses, just like pen tests do. For example, many of you probably know the OWASP ASVS standard. It's basically a long list, quite comprehensive, of checks for secure software. It turns out that only 23% of these checks are checkable with tools only. So tools, for example, cannot see what is not there. And the fact that something is not there is often the problem. Missing authorization, validation, logging, encryption. Also, it's hard for tools to interpret business logic. If I ask, for example, for somebody's password and then check it, but even if it's wrong, I still let users in, a tool will not detect that. And these tools will warn you for SQL injection risks if they believe there is no validation of user input, but they're not sure, which means the tools can provide hints, but Elizabeth and the team still need to analyze many of the findings manually. And then there's the issue that there are multiple tools that Elizabeth and her team need to learn how to use, and they all have different reports and interfaces. And they need help with that, and also help with trying to make it work in the organization, trying to get people aligned, trying to get the right knowledge. And what these tools cannot offer, obviously, is some coaching and organization guidance. And then to make matters worse, if you have multiple teams and you give them complete autonomy and freedom to decide what tools to use and how they're going to use it, it will lead to proliferation and fragmentation of choices. They'll have different approaches, different tools, and different workflow. So team autonomy is very important, but when you go too far, you basically increase all these problems that I've just gone through. And this stage is where we find most organizations are in. They got the tools and they're facing these very tough problems. And if you do it wrong in a first attempt, it will only get more difficult to get everybody along. So first time right is your best bet, and that even makes it more difficult. I know very little organizations that have bridged these gaps completely by themselves. If you've done so, perhaps with some help, you reach maturity 6. And what this means is that you've bridged the tool gap. You solved all these problems that I just discussed. You integrate the results from the tools in a single point of truth for developers and for stakeholders. This single pane is really important to have actually a shared view of what findings are and what their status is. Then you have experts helping you with tool configuration and interpretation of the findings, prioritizing them, filtering them, explaining them. Teams typically need help with that, especially in the beginning. Then you have experts doing code and design review, or at least supporting that with their expertise. And ideally also privacy by design reviews. And then you also need experts providing guidance to the organization in making this change and coaching the teams on building security in. This whole stack of things requires a lot from these experts: security knowledge, tool mastery, coaching abilities, organization sensitivity, technology insight, code review ability, programming expertise, management consultancy capabilities, and they need to be culture changers and have the right soft skills. Such experts are hard to find and hard to keep. And there you have it. The sheer number of things that you need to get right and their complexity. They highlight the key problem, as far as I'm concerned, in today's secure software development. The key problem is the underestimation of how much work it is to get it right, let alone first time right. Secure software development is not a matter of buying some books, getting training, and get some tools. It's an organizational change program that requires investing attention, time, and money. And then it can be done so that Elizabeth and Darcy can work closely together and live happily ever after. Well, what is it exactly that Elizabeth and Darcy need to get right? Let me take you through some great lessons learned, key building blocks of successful secure software development. Starting with, everybody should own the problem. That's the basics. If you don't have that, you're going to have a really hard time. Organization buy-in is key. And there are some tricks to achieve it. And I would say never waste a good crisis. Security breaches, incidents, they really help to gain traction. I'm not saying you should create them. I should say that you should embrace them in the sense that, of course, deal with them, but then use them to gain traction with the importance of security. You can also do a software inspection on one of the systems to provide some evidence of weaknesses in the software, really demonstrate the things that are wrong and the blind spot in the organization. That creates incentive. And another way to get started is to perform a base measurement, not of the security in the software, but of the security in the organization. So the processes that are in place, and compare that to some framework. I like, for example, the OWASP-SAMM initiative, SAMM, which provides an overview, a framework of processes, of controls, process controls, basically, and their maturity levels. And you also get, with OWASP-SAMM, some tools to do self-assessment and to see where you are and what steps you need to take in order to improve. And doing such a base measurement can highlight that a lot of work needs to be done in order to attain some level of appropriate control of security. Another organization aspect is that security experts and developers, they will need to collaborate. Well, just like Elizabeth and Darcy did in the end. A good way to facilitate this is to put them together in a room, for example, when development work is prepared, instead of only discussing tests after the fact. Security teams will transform from quality gate to coaches of development teams almost automatically as the organization goes through the maturity stages that we just discussed. Another good way to create awareness in an organization, to increase that sense of ownership, is tailored training. Provide teams, and not just development teams, but also involving product owners, for example, or architects. Provide them with training that is relevant for their context, their domain, and their technology stack, not just a generic training. This will help them to start covering security requirements. It's actually one way to prepare them, share the principles with them that they need in covering these requirements. And to further cover requirements, you want as many of them dealt with by the building blocks that you have, the frameworks, the libraries, the enterprise architecture. You want to take care of as much of the security issues by providing these, because it strongly reduces the number of requirements that the development teams need to take into account. And talking about taking into account, what remains are requirements that need to be applied. And the trick is to make them as situational as possible and to have tests ready and prepared so they can be quickly deployed. This is the only way to make secure software development work and be part of the development flow. Really important. Let's have a look at how that can work. First, I try to look it up. This is one of the most popular books on the topic of agile application security. What do the books say? Well, about security requirements, it basically says, we don't know. This problem has not been solved yet, which is interesting. So if you're doing stuff in this area, and we're doing a lot of this, it's actually bleeding edge. The thing that sounds so simple, just following a set of requirements, is actually quite difficult to make happen in reality. There's so much for looking it up. There is some guidance available as part of the Agile guidance of OWASP SAM, and I have a link for you later on. And regarding requirements, it follows these ideas. There's a list of requirements that you want to apply. The key is to minimize the daily instructions that developers need to work with, and to let as many as possible depend on the type of task they are working on. That's what situational means in this case. Only then such a list can be effective, because no one can learn this by heart and apply this consistently while doing their work. And this is because, unlike functional requirements, security requirements are cross-cutting concerns. In many cases, you need to constantly think about them, whereas a functional requirement, you can go one by one and cover them. Non-functional requirements, like many security requirements are things that you need to take into account constantly. And that's the whole difficulty. So you see the long list of requirements, but you can do a couple of things. You can first remove a few as they're not applicable to the team. Then you can remove some more that are not relevant for the application. And even more, like I said, done by the framework, done by the building blocks that you provide. So the only thing you need to take care of is that the development teams are actually using those frameworks and building blocks. So that's something that you need to test for. Next are requirements that are what you can call story specific. So they are dependent on the type of work that you do. For example, you're going to work with XML input. Then there's a set of requirements that you need to take into account because of that. Or file uploads, or you're going to output data. And we call these triggers. And these triggers help you select the right requirements depending on your story, the thing that you will be working on. And what it provides, the requirement, is a set of instructions that are written in the language that's helpful for development teams. And not just instructions, but also some tests. And they work as acceptance criteria for the story. So the nice thing is, because you're building something that has XML input, you're getting the appropriate instructions, but you're also getting the tests that go along with it, that as an organization you've prepared, and they become part of the acceptance criteria. So automatically, security becomes part of your development and testing flow. The requirements that remain, they are generic requirements. You want this list, of course, to be as small as possible, because they have to be applied constantly. And you also want these generic requirements to be really testable, preferably, because you don't want any of these to slip between the cracks. They represent instructions that developers really need to master, and tests that always need to be performed as part of, and I'm bringing in Scrum Agile again, definition of done. That's the way how you want to go about these system generic requirements. After requirements, of course, you want to automate that testing as much as possible. But as said, tools are not going to cut it. So there needs to be good attention for code review and manual verification. And you want to do that manual verification in a streamlined fashion, because you have to do it all the time. For example, by having clear checklists with every requirement. Now, the pick list, the triggers that I discussed that bring you the really specific requirements, the instructions, and the tests. The tests include checklists for code reviewers. So part of the acceptance criteria is a checklist of things that need to be checked through code review. So you don't have to code review the entire application before you build or before you release. You do it as part of the story. And the great thing is because you make it part of the flow, security doesn't become this thing that you need to plan and this thing that you can postpone. It becomes part of your hygiene. Just like testing has become part of your hygiene. And nobody, well, mostly nobody is questioning the added value of testing and want you to demonstrate the business case. It's just part of the duty of care. And you see the same transition that testing made from being something that people scratch their heads about and wonder, is this worth it? And what are the benefits? To just being part of professional software development. Because you're shifting left with security, there's another opportunity. Because you can use the same facilities that you build to measure other software quality aspects like privacy, but also maintainability. These are things that are hard to tell from the outside of a system, so you need to measure them. You need to find out about them in the code and by doing automated testing. But you can build on the same things, the awareness, the collaboration, the requirements, the tools, the testing, part of your whole flow. You can add these other software qualities in one approach. And this is the winning approach, not just a security tool, but a tool and the whole services and advisory around it that covers software quality, non-functional quality in general. So these tools and these reviews, they result in findings, and you need to collect and track them somehow. What you preferably need to do with this is to create a single glass pane to integrate them. Otherwise, it will be very hard to track what things to do for teams. There are multiple tools involved. There's code review involved. There's dependency checking. There's a whole list of findings, and they're coming from everywhere. You want to bring them together and share them with development teams, but also with architects, with decision makers, product owners, CIOs, integrating these tools and combining their outcomes. And as said, making the change in the organization and learning to use these tools and to follow up the findings is not easy. It will not happen by itself unless you provide intensive help and guidance, which should include exchanging knowledge between teams so they can learn from each other. What we found, what works really well, is to create community of practices. So within an organization that has multiple development teams, create a community of practice or a guild or a special interest group, whatever you call it. It's a group that shares knowledge. It's not a group that takes the responsibility for security. That's a pitfall. No, it's a group that exchanges knowledge between the teams and shares best practices. It's really helpful to amplify awareness in an organization. So there you have it, the key building blocks that allow you to build security in while you are developing. But what about all that code that you wrote in the past? Without all this attention, you wrote it without all these tools, without the awareness. Did you get it right? It's basically the phase that Elizabeth was in awareness stages 1 and 2. It is a pitfall to only put effort in secure development for new systems and ignoring the older ones. Typically, you have a lot of code that has never been checked well. There's no need to program these systems all over again, of course, but there is an opportunity to have a close look at these systems now that you have the awareness, the collaboration, the requirements, and the test approach. No need to put your head in the sand. Well, voila. These are my key building blocks for you today. And before we wrap up, let me take you through some useful resources first. First of all, the security testing white paper, I think it's now, it's 2 years old, March 2020. I was one of the co-authors. It's a really nice overview. It's available in Dutch and in English of the different testing approaches there are, the penetration testing, the code review, the vulnerability scanning, the fuzzing. It's just very helpful to get insight into what the different test approaches are for secure software development. Then there's an ENISA report called Advancing Software Security Through the EU Certification Framework. It's basically an overview of the state of the art of security standards, their issues, and how we should go about this. It's just, I think, a general nice overview of the state of the art. Then I recommend you to have a look, if you haven't done so already, the OWASP ASVS, a long list, comprehensive list of useful checks, and the MASVS for mobile applications. And if you're looking for a smaller set that's more structured and provides some guidance, easier to grasp, there's GRIP on Secure Software Development. It's a Dutch government standard. There's a Dutch release candidate available, and it's being translated to English. Actually, it's gone live, so it's no longer a release candidate anymore. Then there's the OWASP Application Security Wayfinder. I will show it to you in the next slide. And there's OpenCRI.org, on which I also have a slide, so more on that later. So to wrap up this slide, maturing your process, you can do with OWASP SAM, very helpful guidance there. The chart that you see is an overview of all the controls there are in SAM. And there is SAM Agile guidance, and it contains the story with the requirements and keeping them really tailored to the stories that you're writing, and lists a number of pitfalls and issues that you have while applying secure software development in an agile environment. And so this slide will be shared with you later, but I think I can use the chat to put this information in. Let me see if that works. So you can have a look in your own time. I think that works. Cool.
Yes, it was in chat, Rob. I just wanted to add that to you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, the OWASP Application Security Wayfinder, that can be found on the link on the previous page and in the chat now, duplicate. It is an overview of the key OWASP project, really helpful to find your way into all the nice standard and resources and tooling that's available by OWASP. It's interactive, so if you go to that URL, you can click on these projects, and they're nicely grouped by their role in the development lifecycle and their type. Next is OpenCRI.org. It is an interactive content linking platform meant to unite security standards and guidelines. We found that the landscape of security standards is really difficult. It's complex, it's fragmented, there's a lot of different standards available, and it's hard to find the right material. And it's hard also to connect when you talk about compliance. And it's hard if you have a certain check to find, if you fail that check, how you should fix it, to get code examples, to get explanation of the corresponding threats. So basically, actually, everything is linked together, and organizations that make standards try to link, but these links often break over time. It's hard to update them. And we try to solve this problem with OpenCRI. So OpenCRI contains a semantic web, basically connecting a number of topics. So encrypting personal data at rest is connected to securely storing data, and also to personal data handling, which is then linked to a number of NIST documents. But secure storing regulated data is again connected to encrypting data at rest, which is connected to cryptography. So using OpenCRI, you can go from one specific standard entry or one specific topic to everything that's connected, and all the resources that are available in the world on these different topics. And we've now mapped ASVS, top 10, NIST 63, 53, proactive controls, cheat sheets, testing guide, CWE. And I'd like to give kudos to the ASVS teams and the SKF teams. It's very helpful for linking, but it's also very helpful to find your way. And the nice innovation here is that it's self-maintaining. So standards have links to these topics, And because we scan these standards, the mapping is automatically maintained if the standard moves to another location or gets rearranged. So it's quite sustainable. And that concludes my story. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'd like to give the floor back to Björn.
Yes, thank you, Rob, for this great presentation. And what a pile of information already. And only 45 minutes into this event. I surely hope that Elizabeth and Darcy are now both better educated and they're living happily ever after. That's what I heard from your story. Now, I hope our audience also learned the same things here. I learned a lot about what is needed to successfully build secure software. How does it fit agile? How to change the mindset, requirements, privacy, what have you. So just know that we will have a couple of questions for you after Martin's presentation because Q&A is filling up and the chat is filling up. I'm trying to keep up with all the questions. And having said that, we are looking at the next speaker's presentation. Martin, would you be please so kind to turn on your webcam and your mic? And Martin will introduce himself and his presentation. And I will be back later.
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Okay, so now you should be able to see my screen. It's always very interesting how that works with Zoom meetings.
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah, rhetorical question. So yeah, we also hope great presentation. So next step for me is when you have this building blocks and going there actually is then, so what is the responsibility? So everybody knows this case software development and everybody who does security thinks they are in security. And so therefore, they do security, and I dare to challenge this. Who am I? Those who don't know me, yeah, I was a software developer, a self-trained developer back in the previous century, in the 1900s and the 2000s, 2000s and 21st century, of course. I'm not that old. I come to security, but before I was a developer, I was actually in production area. I was a mechanic for injection molding machines. And I looked into PLC programming. And with this very physical security, actually more safety knowledge, I went into software development and was wondered why there are things are possible where in the production area it would not be possible. And back then the internet was new in the late 90s. They said, oh, no, we will do that. I was like, really? And you all know when you don't work from home, when you in the past, when we drove our work, what crazy people sometimes do in the physical world. To not be secure, actually they endanger their or other people's life. And now in the internet, then we thought everybody would behave right. A big failure, as we know now. So enough about myself. I do a lot of stuff for others. The next thing is more important, like the presentation. And for this, let's start as like change responsibilities in modern software development lifecycle is what is code? And that's changed a lot. And I know that a lot of people are about software development are like, source code is everything, it's just syntax and a grammar and everything. Forget about it. Currently, these days, the modern software developers these days, whatever they can check in your source code repository, your GitHub lab, whatever, they will consider to be source code. That includes the configuration files for your infrastructure service, your Terraforms, your Azure, your whatever you have, your Helm charts. They consider as source code. Therefore, they expect when it's scanned for security, that the source code, that's whatever they set up, will be also scanned and validated for security. And the responsibility is another thing. Like in the past, and I saw a lot of software security specialists said, oh, I did software development, I can do a good job. I did it in my university times. But there's a big difference writing software for your hobby project, for your when you are doing your IT master's or whatever degree, or you write software for an enterprise. And this also means that this 25-year-old, I always jokingly say, senior full stack developer, when they're like, oh, I'm senior, I have done 2 projects or 3 years of software development, then you are not senior if you have not suffered from the consequences of your own choices. But let's go back in history. I truly believe you only do things really well and right the moment when you understand why you're doing it. And software development actually didn't change a lot the previous years. We always had some requirements. Yes, we build software not just for fun, it has to do something. And there must be a design how we do it. Then the software writing, implementation, the verification, and the release, we have to keep it alive. And also the roles didn't change a lot. We have the business people with the money. We have the architects, and I remember early 2000s that we had a lot of architects, the information architect, the functional architect, technical architect, the whatever architect. Then central, then somebody has to write the code, somebody has to test it, and then operation gets it and has to maintain it. So we needed a process for this. And a lot of people recall the times when Waterfall was hot, and people nowadays bash Waterfall, but it's not bad. At least we have a process, and process means that we have a means to do something on a repeated way. When we repeat, we improve, right? Of course, you all know the problems with Waterfall. It got the name because it cascaded from one step of the process to the next one by just sibling down the documentation. And there was no feedback loop. And they came in later because we tried to make Waterfall more agile. But yeah, when you have a question in verification, you couldn't go all the way back up to requirements because the team or functional analysts were already dissolved or worked for another customer, right? So the big release came already in 1996. Extreme programming, 1996, the first documentation about it. It came over to the Netherlands in 2001-ish, 2-ish, the first companies worked with that. And it was great. And actually a lot of things we do these days in Devops, whatever you want to call it, comes from the time of extreme programming. So the planning, we had a planning, design, coding, testing, and keep it alive. The thing is, we said, hey, we build it for not the whole thing documentation once. No, we will incrementally build it. So we had this development cycles, the sprints we call it. So we did a sprint, we did the user story, we had acceptance criteria, we keep the Kimball design, we prototype stuff, and everything in prototype has to be production ready code. People tend to forget that. We did pair programming, different than in Waterfall when our testers and developers were like two camps of fighting each other. Now they became our friends. So we did pair programming. We sat together at one keyboard, and I hated it. Nobody touched my keyboard. We write software because the tester understood the requirements and the developer was the one who could implement it. Test-driven development comes from that time. Perfect. So we built something happily with the developers and the tester together. And then what? We did releases, right? We had acceptance tests, we had integration testing already up there, and we had our demo, and we released it to, yes, to operations. And normally, where is operations? Yeah, in the basement. So they had this artifact, and it was so shiny and great. It worked on my computer, and then we dropped it to operations. They were like, what the heck is this? Yeah, and that's one of the pitfalls for extreme programming. One is operations were not involved. That's really weird. We build something, but we don't have on board who have to maintain it. Also, the architects were there, of course, but the business, there was no business alliance. And of course, with Agile, we say, hey, time and money is solid and functionality is flexible. It's very hard to sell. And a lot of people adopted extreme programming and said, it's so cool. And they just left out documentation. We have saved the document in source code. Not completely right. Anyhow, these days, it's all about DevOps. Let's go there. DevOps is great. Everybody wants to do DevOps, and we have the full stack Java developers. I love them. So how does it work? Let's look into DevOps. We have the camps, right? We have security and development, and on top the business because they pay everybody. And we have two camps, right? So the business has a needs of functionality, so they assign some cool new feature or whole application. Ooh, great, to the development team. And they say, great, we have a DevOps Wild West. We can decide ourselves which technology is best, which target system, because we are DevOps, right? And they build and deploy this new cool feature. And then someday, the security team finds out about it, and they hire or have a hacker, and they hack it, and they break it, and then they will blame and shame. Hey, Saiso, have you ever seen this in your security requirements? This tool is really, really bad. So they have this really long, dreadful, long security report, and they blame and bash and the developers, and they will become to the business and say, we cannot go live. This application has to be fixed first. It's what Rob said earlier. It has to be fixed first. We have to go live next week. We have PR already there. Our competitors are there. So it costs us money. So business has no other chance than to accept the risk, right? And that is the fail. And that's the reason why I put DevOps on it. So that is the misinterpretation of DevOps. So of course, we didn't do one giant leap from extreme programming to DevOps. It's actually DevOps is a collection of things. And they have been used for some people interchangeably wrongly. Because first we come from the extreme programming, we came to agile, right? As I already said, something from we had the time and money is solid, we cannot spend with that, but the functionality we deliver is can be changed, right? And we deliver on the basis. So you see, agile focus on the process, and the change is highlighted. So we don't know what we need next year. What we had in Waterfall, we shoot out an application, we spent 6 years on developing, and then we delivered 7 years later something the customer never needed in the first place. Now we're highlighting on changes. We progressively build something and will during the development years, then see if you go the right direction. So we're accelerating on delivery, not one thing to wait for monoliths, but small features continuously. And when you then deliver something continuously, that builds, hey, we need a continuous build. And to eliminate everything we do by manual, we have human error abilities. So we have to have some software-defined lifecycle. Brings us to CI/CD, where we're highlighting the tools. The more tools, the better. And that's where we came from extreme programming, keep it simple. It's also many bits, simply bits, that it becomes complex to oversee. But the emphasis on CI/CD is automation. We're eliminating the human factor of human errors, the factor of human errors, right? And now then we came to DevOps currently. DevOps is still for quite some time. It's not that new anymore. It's hot. And it focuses on the culture. And it's a big, big, big difference. It highlights on the roles. We have different roles because, guys, an ops guy in DevOps is still an ops guy in the context of software. It's not somebody who walks around with the server in his hands or the actual network cable. No, in the software-defined environment, they will configure the software-defined hardware. It's not a really operational, it's a software context. And the full stack developers who do a full stack in the context of software development. Keep that in mind, that is important. So that said, the emphasis is on responsiveness. Sounds maybe initially a bit the same as for Agile. It's a bit different, and I will go more in details into that later. So now we come from DevOps to DevSecOps. And I put it in braces because I think it was one of the questions. Yes, the sec in DevSecOps should be temporary. It's only there to emphasize security. And of course, we want that everybody is unknowingly able. So we don't need to emphasize security. But when you want to emphasis on it, then you say SecOps. So it's DevOps. We have DevTestOps, we have DevAgileOps, and DevWhateverOps. And I talk about DevSecOps because I want to put the emphasis on security. Yeah, so if somebody's DevOps, of course they are right. I know that a lot of purists say no, security is more important than software, but if there's no software, we don't need security. Anyhow, so what I see a lot of time when they implement it, so now we do DevSecOps, we have static code analysis. It means that actually we can look at the source code in a static way because there's all the tools is in the source code. We can see all that in it. So if you can find any error, that's what people really believe. And the great thing on SaaS, the static application security testing, is you can do it before you write one line of code because you can already in your CI/CD pipeline set it up that when you ever check in a file, that it will be validated. There are different levels of depth of validation, and people forget it. It's not just one size fits all for even for SaaS. Because when I write code, I compared code writing with writing a book. If I write a book, I write a story in my text editor. I don't want to write the whole story. In the end, I look for grammar and spelling mistakes. I want them on time during my time that I write a story. Let me know if there's a grammar fault. Let me know if I misspelled time because it takes too much time to fix it, right? So you can put it already in there, in the IDE, in the editor that you're using sorry, in the IDE that your developers use, because developers that live in the IDE. Everything outside of the IDE will not be used. So they will early feedback, quick feedback, not a deep scan, but just, is my grammar correct? Do I use functions correctly? Have I file level security? Very quick instant feedback, right? SaaS. Then you have SCA. It's a new hot thing. It's almost, I think it was 2015 when they said the unknown vulnerability in third-party libraries. Now it became hot, and now we all who has lost their holidays, the Christmas holidays, with Log4Shell or Log4j, formerly known. Yes, our software is not these days 100% written by yourself. Even my time when I was developer so long ago, we didn't write out everything ourselves, mostly. But even your framework, your library, your technology, you write the source code, your PHP, Java, whatever, Ruby, it's a framework. It's somewhere people have written it. So that's all your third-party libraries, and you need to know about the dependencies. And there you have software composition analysis. It looks in all the bits and pieces that make your software, if there are any known vulnerability in there. And of course, it's one thing is there is a vulnerability in there. The other thing is it relevant? There can be a vulnerability in a third-party library I don't care about because I don't use this feature. And in the past, we said, no, you need the newest one and the best one, because otherwise it can be used later on. And then we saw for Heartbeat, and yeah, the newest is not always the best, right? And we had to go a version back. So yes, to maintain SCA means that you look in what you call the, sorry, I forgot about the hard analysis. Is this vulnerability even a problem on my software? But sometimes you just have to say, I don't want to risk it, and say, I don't want to have a certain version. That's what we see with Log4j. Some applications, they don't care, they have not a problem, because only when you use Log4j correctly, you don't have this problem. But then, yeah, do you want to risk this? It's a choice, right? It's always risks a choice. So after that, you also can then have DAST, and the same thing. I heard people say, oh, the DAST we set up later when we have a test server or a production-like environment. Ridiculous. The moment you have a testing environment, you can set up your dynamic application security testing. That means when SaaS, I look at all the source code. In a DAST, I look from the outside. So I have a building and I can walk through in the blueprints, that will be your SaaS. When I can kick the walls and tick on the windows and the doors, that will be your DAST. And the question is then between this all software knowledge in the SaaS and this look from the outside in DAST is, where can I link this? How can I link the vulnerabilities I find in the one environment to the other? That's not easy. The other side is, when you have SaaS, is the one better than the other than DAST? No, you need both. When SaaS, yes, we said there's all truths in there, but what is about the dynamic vulnerabilities, like cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, where some controls or mechanism measures are outside the source code? You can verify that. So you have to alert, but it's not relevant. It's not a false positive, it's an unrelevant finding. Whereby in DAST, for example, for SQL injection, I cannot find that maybe I missed one path in the way how I can actually trigger SQL injection. I would miss it because I look from the outside and it's a black box for me. So I need both to have the full visibility and the interaction. And then the next step would be then IS, what is currently set as to be hot, where you have an agent monitoring the virtual environment where all happens. So you do your DAST testing and you measure, monitoring your target environment, the virtual machine where you, for example, Java runs in, what happens if it behaves correctly, right? So SaaS, static, SCA is the software composition analysis, DAST is dynamic application security testing, and IS is interactive. So you interact with your application. Yeah. And of course, we have now our security champion, right? Because it's DevSecOps. We need a security champion. As Rob said, it's not the one who should fix all the security issues, right? Or just mark them as false positives. No, it's more than that. And I want to go into that later on. But in the past was then, oh, you do all the security things and the rest can develop, right? That's somebody, yeah, so the shift left was shift all those things you don't want to do as a security specialist off to the security champion. Let them handle that. That will not work because there are problems. There is problems when you push left incorrectly when you do security, just push off to DevOps. First one is to add more complexity. Security has abbreviations and namings the developer are not aware of, right? So the complexity of what is now a cross-site scripting, what is tab nabbing? I don't know how many people of you can explain stuff like that. What is the real problem now with the cross-site request for tree and stuff like that? So it's the new complexity. You need to have knowledge and you have training. So then you have more systems to maintain all the SaaS, DAS, SCA, IS tools. Somebody has to maintain it, right? You need new software, new third-party software. You have a tool per technology. Maybe one vendor is better for those and the other vendor for others. So you need both them. Both are not cheap. So you need vendor management. And of course, our security specialists, they get KPIs on finding vulnerabilities, right? The more vulnerabilities you find in application, the better you are. And when you are doing automate, you need a manual verification. That's a security champion, right? And of course, it was all about offloading responsibilities to the security, the development team. That's not how to be done, right? Let me see what goes wrong in that. So one step is what you should do now, so how to make it right, to the positive side. So how to do DevSecOps. Again, our players, the first thing we have to understand, it's everybody's responsibility. You cannot offload responsibility. Yeah. When you have the shared responsibility, you need also a shared truth. You need one dashboard. I remember times that it was very hard to explain when you have one data set that depending on what angle you look at the data set, you get different results. These days with data mining of data analytics, people should understand that the same data, when I look at it, is a different context of requests of questions, I get different results. So we have one data set where we keep all the results, one vulnerability dashboard, right? And there, when it's there already, now our security requirements are known. We can put them in upfront, as Rob said. Then we can define our project that feeds into this depending on which requirement. If it's a desktop application, it's different than it's a SaaS service. If it's an SQL database, it's different than it's a mobile app, right? So system-specific requirements early already in the dashboard. So when I feed my security testing, that's always in my testing pipeline, into the dashboard, the requirements match what you need. And who maintains and operates the system? Many times when it comes to web, we have the security, they pay the license, so they hire the security group, so they maintain the server where this web application runs on that does the security testing. The security will able fit to maintain and run a system, an IT system? No, give it to the developers, because those tools I just said, the SaaS, DAS, SCA are not security tools, they are developer tools. So give them to the developers. They know how to write software, right? When it's there, so they know how to integrate. Imagine whatever you do, somebody comes, hey, here, I have this cool tool, and you have to link to that, and everything that comes out, we kick your ass. That will not work. So make it theirs, they can early adopt and integrate. And that's where the security champion comes in place, because it's the guild or whatever, the tribe of security aware developers. It's not a security person, it's a developer where you have security awareness. And they are those who maintain and operate the dashboard from the technical perspective. They are responsible to integrate your build pipeline results, test results to the vulnerability dashboard. Yeah. It also means then now penetration tester can do what they are made for, right? They're humans, so they can spend on find vulnerabilities, flaws, functional vulnerabilities that a tool cannot find, not just the bugs. I don't want my security resource, it's not cheap, to spend time on report cross-site scripting. Please, no, we have tools for that, right? So we can increase the tools and increase the testability of our applications. So it's a shared responsibility for security over the teams. Another benefit of this, one is one unified dashboard, maintain, operate, owned by the developers. And that can go beyond, not a vulnerability management dashboard. I don't want to see how many projects I have, and every project I can see, oh, they have 512 SQL injections. Oh, now they have only 560 SQL injections, it must be better. No, I want to see the trends in my software asset management. I want to see what software do I have internally developed, but also my external software managed. Because when I was a security a guy at my previous company, my biggest problem was not my internal software. It was 130 countries. We had HR systems. It's much more complex than my own software. It's a small bit of it. So vulnerability management, yes, but software asset management is more important. But I can actually do risk management and reporting, so I know what's going on. One unified dashboard to fulfill compliancy. And it also means that I see trends. I don't want to micromanage application projects by number of issues. I want to manage my software development practice by insecurity trends. Okay. How there will be then benefit? Let's go with this. It will benefit like this. The moment it's integrated, the development gets a feedback. So it's not after the first review, because in the past the security team was the ministry of no, right? Nothing against go, it must be security approved. And now it's the ministry of slow, because you have to wait for 3 weeks or months. Imagine that, when you have the security check. That doesn't work for an agile environment, right? I do something, I want feedback. When you manage that, make it early feedback, then I know what I have to fix. It's like I said, when I write a book, I want to see when I type, I look up, oh, I can touch type, so I don't type like this. I can type and see, oh, it's misspelled, and I fix it. Maybe later on, or I can choose, oh, I fix it before I save it, or before the end of the day. I want to have the choice that I save it before it's pushed to the repository. And the other side is the security team. They now have the feedback that they can monitor, not on numbers, but on trends. So when I see that a certain part of the teams have been raising in whatever cross-site request forgery, then I can look, what is the problem? So what are similarities? So I can say, hey, team 1, 4, and 17, or whatever, what cool name they have, security champions, you have an increase on this vulnerability. What changed? And then I maybe say, oh yeah, we had a new version update on our front-end template engine. So I can be at front, say, hey, who else uses technology who is about to update? Maybe wait with the update, because I can now manage on trends and say, let's see if I fix the other one. If we find a fix or a countermeasure for this security problem, maybe I can wait for the next release of the template engine. And so I can manage upfront before something goes wrong, and not by the total numbers and give them like, ooh, you fixed 3 SQL injections, you are a good team. It doesn't work, right? So monitor and mentor. That's also change responsibility from the security people. I have seen so many times that I come to developers and they say, they lean back like, oh, you come and do the security. I told them, of course not. Like, you're the security guy. I say, yes, but do you really think that me as one person can fix security of something you built in months, in a week? No. I can be the grower, I can be the teacher to show you how to make it more secure. And actually, when you have good developers who care, many times they know what's wrong, but they haven't got the time or the means to fix it. So when you talk to them and give them the ability, then suddenly it will improve. As I said, everything you are made responsible of, you do better. So the security team can monitor and mentor the development team. That means actually you have to speak with them. And the next thing is then for the CISO, he has control and strategy. If I see trends going up, that means that I have a strategy to which training I need. It's not this, mandatory 1 week security training every year that rips out the developers out of their context, and the .NET developer gets a security course taught by PHP. Totally senseless, useless, waste of my time and money, but hey, I got my compliancy. Now I can look in what's going on in the trends and can give the right trainings to the right people. Say, hey, you write an application that's a backend application, but you use DB2. Maybe there's a DB2 security training we need. Maybe it's a new Azure application. Hey, what's the latest Azure configuration security problems? Right for the Devops team, for the off person of the teams. You can manage on trends, predict on trends. So important. And of course, and means for the reporting, for the business, that they can also see and prove that they're actually in control. They're not surprised. So many times we have seen it, because that's why they say you don't actually want a vulnerability dashboard, you want a software as asset management overview. How many times we have not seen that we come somewhere and ask, how many applications do you have? You get a list, let's say 100 applications. 30 never been live, 30 don't exist anymore, and the other 40 you never made it to the list. When you have a dashboard, a living truth fed by all the teams together, everybody's responsible, has his or her responsibility kept alive, then you can help. And also you can monitor. Monitor means that teams that do a good job, you let the reins fall a bit. They have more freedom. And those who try to cut the corners, you can pull the reins. Cut the corners means like little kids, like developers are not different than little kids. You do something wrong, I hold you closer to myself. If you do right, you can go a bit further. That's how you teach them, mentor, right? Not punish. I have seen so many times when I come somewhere and be a security guy, it's like being hit by the security stick. Yeah, when I hit you every time on the same spot with the same stick, you see the stick, just always starts hurting. It means also a different responsibility for the CISOs, because you know now the trends going on in technologies, you have to be prepared, but you also have to be listening to the security people. Maybe they talk to you. You have more time together speaking and sharing. And there's no, definitely this homeworking times, it's really hard, but that's what we need. Again, back, I always truly believe when you know what requirement is there for what reason, it will help you better. We have seen it, like I think the best example here in the Netherlands is the A2. In the time when it was the old A2, those who remember it, it's only 2 lines in one direction, you could do 120. It was a terrible asphalt tar. You had aqua running by heavy rain, and it's the Netherlands, there's a lot of rain. And then you get a 5-lane highway with a better asphalt tar, no aqua bending anymore, and you can only do 100. And if I don't understand why that is, people will cut corners. And then I can try to put mesh into alert when something goes wrong and can heavily find them. What is the solution? Yes, they will go slower for this monitored bit, but in between or in the end of that, people will then get rid of their frustration. So when you teach them, understand them, yes, maybe it's inconvenient, maybe it comes, or maybe you just have to do something because, but if you explain them, I'm a bank, for example, I have to do this so that we have also our surveillance easier. They will work together. Share your thoughts and responsibilities so they can help you and think with you, right? Again, agile is about a process. Highlight of change. CI/CD, highlighting on tools. So eliminating the human error. That also means for security, freeing human resources to find actually the right stuff. And not forgetting DevOps focus on the culture, and it's highlighting on the roles and emphasis on responsiveness. And that's a very important one, because when you have run something in this full DevOps environment with all the automation tool and your security people checking, then you need also something that monitors the real life environment, right? We all know that the production-like environments, they're everything but production-like, right? Most of the times they are kind of production-like. I have seen very funny flaws that took us a lot of time just because the difference between the Linux Java environment and a Unix Java environment. It cost us like a week of breaking our heads why something goes wrong. Yeah, so you have to do security upfront to save money in the back, but you don't forget the external security, right? Your internal checks. That also means maybe something like your OSINT, open source security intelligence. Like what do you scan, refine about yourself on the outside? Is the list you have, right? Is that still valid? So the whole thing means that shared responsibility is everybody has to do something, but do actually that what you're good at. Security is not good at being the owner of an application and dashboard, to maintain a dashboard. No, the development are. And they have the experience and the knowledge and the tools. And by giving them the tools, they have the responsibility. And the other side will be, you have the responsibility, so enable them, give them ability to live up to the responsibility they have, right? And of course, we are not living in a land with unicorns, the far to the rainbows. So it's a process. It's a process, a long process, and you start the process and change by listening to them and help them early, not come at the end and say no. Definitely not holding them back. I was a bit quicker than I thought, but Björn.
A bit quicker. Well, I applaud you for your long deck. Thank you for your presentation, Martin. I liked a couple of these analogies that you made, the department of slow and all the personas that you used throughout your presentation. I mean, that makes it easier to make things stick, also because it is describing a little bit of the role that each and every one of them has. I see a lot of kudos and a lot of questions in chat and in Q&A, so I would like to ask Rob to also enable his webcam and his microphone. Wow, thank you. Chat is going berserk here, so let me see if I can make a little bit of straight questions out of this. I copied a lot of them from chat earlier. Rob, I see a couple of questions that are specifically addressed to you, so let me start with those. I like you presenting it in the form of a maturity model. Can you share, as you talk from a global experience, in percentage, how many organizations are in level 4 and 5, and how many are at level 2, 3?
Yes, I looked at that question. I gave it some thought, and I got an answer. Just pen testing, that's level 2, is 20%. So we're talking about number of organizations, right? Then level 3, having books and hoping that that's covered, that's 5%, really small. Then scan tools only, 25%. And then the big one, level 5, trying to bridge that tool gap. So taking steps to make it easier and provide expertise. That's 45%. And level 6, everything solves, just 5%.
Okay, so there's still work to do for the majority of us, I think.
Yes, but it really is in the air. It's a theme for many organizations. It's really buzzing.
Yeah,
I would be interested when you say 25% have the tools, how many use them correctly?
Oh yeah. Don't get me started. I think it's not only for software development. Let me buy a hammer now. I'm a carpenter. Anyway, I think there are a couple of questions about slides in the recording of today. Let me do this in general. The slides will be shared on our website, and the video that we created out of this, or that will be created out of this, sorry, Zoom is slowly recording everything for us, will be posted on YouTube. It does need some clipping off at the beginning, at the end. So give us a couple of days, but then it's online on YouTube. I see here, let me see, this one is taken care of. I see one for Martin. Rob and or Martin, do you have any opinions on the SAFE framework? And SAFE was written in a kind of strange way.
Yeah, that's how you write it.
Yeah. Rob or Martin?
I can start. I can be really short. I like their community of practice approach. I apply it a lot. For the rest, I'm not an expert.
Okay. Any thoughts on your end, Martin?
Yeah, SAFE has always, we have kind of competition of joining the Dutch with a nice word, it's like con-collega's. So we are already kind of the same field, and we enable each other and work together.
Awesome. Good. I hope that answers your question. Let me see, because Mr. Kumar or T. Kumar asked, like payment card world has PCI DSS, is there a worldwide standard of secure software development?
Martin can extend my shortlist, I think. I recommend to Google ECSO syllabus. It's a great publication that lists all the standards out there at that point in time. It mentions 3 that I would highlight as my personal favorites. It's OWASP-SAM, of course. It's the BSIM by Gary McCraw, Citrotol, Synopsys nowadays, which is more data-driven. And there's IEC 62443, which is for industrial applications, but it's actually quite good. in describing a generic software development lifecycle for security.
If I may add to that, so the thing is a standard or guideline, and that makes it kind of awkward. For example, we have the OWASP sum. That for previously has been the open sum. OWASP is not a standard body, so we have no standardization body. So standard being as a best practice is something else than a standard being a standard body certified, right? The OWASP is not a standardization body. So the PCI DSS is actually a standardization body when you are part of this whole digital payment system. Then you have to be verified against PCI DSS. I think this new standard is a different name now, right? And I think it's really good what it did for us as OWASP. PCI DSS, the first version, said your application should be scanned against the OWASP top 10. Great, isn't it? Wait a minute. Should I have this in there or note something in there? And do I have to fix it? Oh, I don't have to fix it. That's also cool. So the standard, don't rely on the standard. Yes, you have to do them for requirements, but I don't care which standards you have, as long as you have a practice on where you approach.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think that was also one of the remarks. There are so many, there is not just one golden rule, as long as you adopt one of them and stick to it, I think. Yeah.
And a lot of them come from the same inheritance. I know that, as far as I know, Peter Stelman, he had how do you call it? The Stammbaum, an inheritance tree of standards, because they try to fix the same and they are specialized for this one and that one. So you have the inheritance tree of standards. So it's really good project from a student point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the same as I heard the ENISA and NIST pass by a couple of times. I think they try to do the same thing, although they come from different platforms or backgrounds and regions. What is the difference between hygiene and security requirements? That's a question from Hans to Rob.
Yes, I believe the question was answered in chat, but I can definitely give it a go very quickly. Yeah. It's meant to be the same in my narrative. So the idea is hygiene means things that you do, like wash your hands before you go have dinner. Security requirements are like if you're going to work with XML files, you need to have these parser versions and these configurations there.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that.
That is what I mean. Is I heard many times they say security check. Yeah, we have this high important application. There's more tests that we test, and this is other application. We write code as we want. There must be a way how we write code, right? And they say security development doesn't take more time if it's the way how you just do things. As Rob says, if you go on table, I have to send you back to wash your hands, then it costs time. When it's in second nature to wash your hands before you go to the table, you lose no time, right? So it's not depending on the importance of the application and how you do your coding. It's you do it right, and the verification differs.
Yeah, and I think that also ties back to what you said earlier, Martin. The fact that most developers want to develop in a secure way, or at least try to fix things, because in the end they want to be proud of what they do as well. And if it is more secure, that's fine, but it doesn't change the fact that you need to develop it in that way. Yeah. I see one question for Rob. From your knowledge, what is more efficient to have one dedicated security expert per team, a secure champion, or make security expertise part of everyone's role?
That's a good question. I would say if you have a good security expert, don't make him or her part of a development team, but let him or her help multiple teams. If you have a security champion, ideally, this is not a security expert because you don't want to put responsibility for security into the hands of one person. You can make a security champion a liaison or task this person with knowledge exchange, but never, ever let that person take the sole responsibility for security.
I think it's the same thing as you have people who do the work like programming or developing software, and you have managers, and they typically they are not the same kind and breed of people, in all honesty?
I think the question is, what do you think make responsible of security? They are not those who put the name on the blood signed, there is no vulnerability in this release, right? But so it's everybody's responsibility to write as secure as possible. That's what I tried in my talk to say. It's shared responsibility, but you're different parts of the chain, right? It's like in our society, we all have a responsibility towards our society. And actually here in Europe and the Netherlands, we have some requirements, expectations. And as everybody does his bit, we are more secure. We could take it out even to the COVID discussion if you want. But yeah, there will always be people who are slacking and people do more the best. And as long as more people do the best, you will have better results. And to make them do the best better, you have to understand why you should do it and how to do it.
Yeah, so you can actually read that question in two ways. Is everyone a security expert? No, everyone should have security as a mindset or secure development as a mindset. Is there one person who signs off? Yes, probably, or a group that is not developing itself, probably, as what I get from Rob, correct?
Signing off, what do you mean?
Well, that there is the people who are developing are not the same people who are reviewing codes and signing off that everything is secure, and is the ultimate security sign-off platform body.
Okay, so to me that has a sense of a quality gate situation where there's a security team that is a quality gate and needs to sign off. Of course, this is still part of many maturity stages, but in the end, you want to sign off to be by the collaborative, which is development team supported by the security professionals.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me see if I see some other questions. How to magically transform. I see one question. Threats from supply chain and third-party software are increasing. Reviewing every external code and tool from suppliers is also not realistic. Any advice for achieving reasonable trade-offs? This was in Rob's session, but
I can start the answer and Martin can pick up. The question mentions the need to review external code. I would advise against that, although I would applaud more initiatives to do that as a community effort. But the key is, as a regular software development organization, you better rely on the documentation of known vulnerabilities in these external dependencies. And there are public databases for this, such as VulnDB. Use a package manager and dependency checker. Have a quick response process for new vulnerabilities that arise, such as log4j or log4shell. Do some due diligence on reputation when you add a dependency, and try to let the number of dependencies not grow too big. Those would be my takeaways.
Yeah, I think that what we see in what I call always the Devops Wild West is they say, oh, developer responsibility, so we can choose what we want. And that's a very nice anecdote from, how to call them names, the guy from Amazon.
Bezos.
Bezos, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos.
They said, oh, you can choose. They say, yes, you can choose between .NET or Java. 2 choices, not 100 choices, right? You have to stick somewhere. So you cannot do everything, every library. No, there is as Rob said, requirement, and it's what I try to say is a responsibility. So you have to, developers have to understand you have a responsibility to that you now write enterprise software. And therefore, you have a more mature approach. You're not 25-year-old. Yes, we need the people say we conquer the world, we jump off the cliff. Then we need all the people say maybe not all at once. You go first, right? Try to be sensible and mature in your choice of software development.
That was also a question, although I think you answered it already, Martin. What are good SAST and DAST tools in the market?
I'm kind of based. I work for Micro Focus 45, but yeah, Frank.
There you go.
Yeah, now you have to mention at least 2 others. No.
Yeah. So what I want to do. So when you look in generally. There's Veracode, they have their own check marks. There is open source tools from OWASP for dynamic scanning. We have SemGrep for other things. We have now Sneak. GitHub has their own tools. Sonotype is getting better. So you have all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The thing is, you have to choose the right one. I don't care which one you use. Yeah, you know, my salary has to be paid, but
of course, yeah.
As long as you use something, if you do by hand, the thing is not which tool you use. You have a tool, you have a technology stack, right? You have a development process. Find the right tool in your context. And the thing is, you should actually, a bigger company should not have one tool. They have 2 or 3. It's like you said something about carpenter. They don't have one hammer. They have 4 different hammers. The problem is a hammer is much cheaper than a software security tool, analysis tool. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But the one is better in Java.NET. The other one is better in C++. Oh yeah, I missed the Synopsys, also a tool. So yes, there's so many. What is your context? What is the languages you support? What is your development? Do you have an on-board? Do you have external development, internal development? There's so many things. And do you proof of concept? And as long as you use something, it's most. And you start not with a security tool. Start with a software quality tool. Cyclomatic complexity, coding standards. Have the base of quality right. Don't try to run first or high jump. Try to stand up and walk first. Software quality is the first step.
Amen.
Yeah. Wow, definitely. Almost a nice quote for the end of the evening, but we still have a couple of questions to go through. Sorry. One for Martin. Security can be seen as a non-functional requirement, but you could also make user stories about security. I read different opinions about it. What's your take on this?
This is a discussion I never understand fully, ever since I'm in security. A lot of people try to push it off to non-functionals because non-functionals are great. It's for the architect, right? But login, if I have a login query and have a SQL section in my login, then it's a functional requirement. Why I have to log in? After 3 logins, I cannot log in anymore. It's the insecurity. No, it's not a function, non-functional. As a security, it's a functionality we develop. We develop a technology, and you see, is this actually more say it's a bug or a flaw? It's a technical flaw, or is it a functional insecurity? And what's our risk, right? So I don't care if it's a function, non-functional. If there is something, a risk or a vulnerability or a flaw or bug, what is the impact? What is the likelihood? Do I have to fix it now? Can I avoid it easy? Who hasn't thought about it? Yeah, and they have the threat modeling, what Rob told you about, it upfront as the non-functional.
Thank you.
Maybe I can add to that. Sometimes you see abuse cases on backlogs. They are useful as a sort of a reminder what can go wrong. But in my opinion, they should not be treated as things that you can plan and that you can have in your sprint, because they do not represent a specific change. They can be helpful for threat modeling, but not to plan in your sprint.
Okay.
About threat modeling, Rob, did you talk about cornucopia?
I didn't talk about it, but.
So when you use threat modeling, there's also a good thing to actually whiteboard exercise threat modeling, but there's also a good way to gamification, where, for example, the OWASP cornucopia, and it's a very strange word, but look in the application security Wayfinder, Rob mentioned, where you have like off keyboard and all do the security threat modeling as a card game. So you're not diverted by your keyboard or with other ideas. And I did it several times with customers and friends, and do it for free with OWASP, and it's always helpful.
It's cool.
So,
yeah, and it's a nice gift as well. I don't know if they're still available through OWASP, are they, Martin? But the idea is that you
talking
get this
about it
card game, yeah, and it contains typical threats or patterns that help you think about how your system can be compromised.
It's based on the ASVS.
Johannes asked, how can we create a bridge between the IT development world and these ideas about building security in and the OT ISC development world? In the OT world, we need to shift left as well, not only because of security, but also because of safety. Long question.
Interesting. Yes, I once was at an industrial control system conference, and it felt a bit out of place because I had a very large room and I asked, does anybody know of the OWASP ASVS? And nobody did. It's still a mystery to me, and still the 62443 standard is quite amazing. So there is a drive there, but maybe Martin, you have some insights.
Yeah, I think it's the same as we had in SCADA in the past, right? They come from the industry, and I myself come from the industry, and I did a talk for somebody who does PLC programming. I don't want to tell any who was it, and I looked and said, hey, I did PLC programming when I was a mechanic, and it's totally different these days. So they come from a different area, and they're just looking over the edge from this, our current age on software development and all that can go wrong. So they are now opening up to this bad outside world, because they're previously closed systems. So it's very scary for them. But they say definitely when you look in the automotive or the other OT, they have so limited hardware specs. You know, these days with all the cloud abilities, more RAMs, more space, no problem. Try that in an OT environment, on an IoT environment. And there's actually good European regulations for IoT these days. It's they certify not the product, but also the process to create a product, right? You have to prove that you are able to update and improve and fix, for example. But it's very different from the origins where they come from than from software or web development.
Maybe a direction to answer Johannes' question additionally is to have more knowledge exchange and more mingling between the people involved in that area and the people in IT to share ideas.
I've been there for I'm the Cavalry, also open source community, with the European community talks about certification of IoT devices and OT requirements. So it's you go there and they look at you like, because they think they don't have the same problems, but with now the modern systems, they get the same problems as we have software development have. So that just
I have one question. I think it was in Rob's session. How do you balance securing software with keeping it usable, debuggable by developers, and performant? And I think it was already answered just a moment ago, because with the quality, well, take a quality in built from a quality platform and then built in security, I think. Or
I would add that having a good process on comply or explain will allow you to make trade-offs consciously and openly, document them. So not just saying thou shall apply two-factor authentication, but say you need to apply it, but if you don't, come with your exception and explain to us why, and then perhaps you can deviate. Being open to such discussions is an important part of culture and processes that helps here.
Yeah.
And of course, as we Rob called it hygiene, if you have the basic right, if you write quality software, you have eliminated a lot. But there's also what I said, the bugs and the flaws, and then we quoted Gary McCraw before, and he said, so a bug is a technical flaw, and a flaw is a functional flaw. So when you do, for example, you forget some security, an example is, I know that in the past, when we had mobile phones, not being able to do anything then call, a mobile phone number in the bank, when you gave it to them, they were happy because then they could call you and sell you banking products. But these days with mobile apps, your mobile phone number actually is a verification token, right? And I know a bank, they had no problems with the app itself, but the process of changing your mobile phone number was so easy because it was a very old process. So I could call up and say, hey bank, I'm Rob van der Veer. They were happy, hey, we get the phone number. Forgetting that these days a phone number is more than that. And that's a flaw. And you can find flaws only when you look at the same thing with the security goggles on. That's what we think. The same with open source software is not more secure, less secure than proprietary software, because we all as software developers look at the code in the same context. So you have to look differently in the code. And this is what I say, but whatever you write, when you look for security issues on a technical flaw, that is you're writing software, right? How you write SQL statements. I don't do string combination, for example. When you look at flaws, it's much more complex, because now you have to see, is the process, as I as a Devops team have, over the company process, the data that I have, is it relevant or has a different specification on the other end of the application? There's a different security. So security is not left or right or here or there. It's on, on magnitude you look at it.
Thank you. No, not at all. I have to process this. I have a lot to process by the end of this webinar. There are a couple of questions about, where were they, about recommendations about unified dashboards or vulnerability dashboards. Are there any tools that people can take a look at?
Defect Dojo?
They have, yes, that's what I want to say. So Defect Dojo is a good one, so open source tool. But actually, it's also, again, depending on what you do. If you have internal development, you want something there. Some tools providers have dashboards, they are also integratable. We have always had threat tricks, but it's still open source version, but it's not maintained anymore. We always have Defect Dojo, whereby Defect Dojo is more the intent to have the security verification scheduled per team, right? You have this security assignments, security team assignments against software development assignments to measure points. But still, you can use it definitely on a wider space, and you can fit in different security tools results, because it's the same problem when you have different security tools, they have different way to report. So you have to manually see what's all there. Defect Dojo, for example, does that, and you can make commercial about Defect Dojo because it's an OWASP tool and everything always is for free. So they understand different tools reporting, and they even can, to a certain extent, correlate the findings from comparable tools. I mean, two SaaS tools, they can find, two DaaS tools can compare it. SaaS and DaaS, you cannot easily compare it. So Defect Dojo comes closest. I would like to see others who have more risk component, and I know a vendor, and so it's depending on what you want, and can start with something that you have more than one view on your software, and not just sticking to this, I have this tool and I have this dashboard. Try to get a maximum from the dashboard out there so that every people can use it.
No, but I think how I see people use dashboards is a visualization of where you stand at that point, and some of them are real time, some of them are more on a scheduled interval. People are quite visual, and it's easier to work with dashboards. So
when you do a bit triggering, you can also see trends, right? As I said, I don't care if I have 5 SQL injections or 6. So the team with 6 SQL injections is not as good as the one with 5. No, it's both bad. So I want to see a trend. Do I have it's going down? It's good. It's going up? It's bad. That's with security, right? It's the other way around. Normally you say business says up is good and down is bad. We say everything is more is bad, less is better, is good. And you need to find a way to trend this. Sorry?
So good dashboard provides, you could say, 3 things. It's visualization and analysis, including the trends. It's integration from multiple sources, and it's traceability, tracing the risk acceptance, etc. And I know that CodeDX was, and perhaps still is, positioned as a system that does this. Is now part of Synopsys. And we at SRG, Sigrid is our platform. We also have such correlation dashboards and tool integration in place.
We have one.
So you have one single pane of glass with the whole overview in one.
That's the idea for all these vulnerability tools.
Yes. But again, I think that's different, because vulnerability tools we have 2 as Fortify. What I want in my talk is the dashboard is more than that. It's not just listing your number of vulnerabilities per project or scan. What you really want to have is something where I see per technology to have a rising trend, or the trend goes down, and also see my risk, because when I have the risk, I can integrate in this dashboard. Then I don't have the discussion, for example, why do I have to pay for the renewal of the certificate? I know that I have a certificate and it's required to this security requirement there, right? So the correlation from security measures from your security requirements to your application is also important.
Yeah, but is that not part of your impact analysis on what the risk is? I mean, it can be small, but if it has a wider use.
Yeah.
So
it's the thing I envision with my talk, it's not there yet. I have seen different tools, and I try to find people to build this more than one purpose. dashboard.
Yeah, but I think the whole audience here is in an industry that will never die, I guess, because security is something that will never stop being a thing on the agenda, I think. I also see here that Sander Meyer says you can use OWASP Secure Codebox and OWASP Dependency Check as the SCA dashboard in chat.
Secure dashboard, yes. Dependency check looks as an SCA tool. So dependency check by itself, it looks in the normalized vulnerability, the national vulnerability database about known vulnerabilities in third-party libraries.
It does have its own dashboard.
Yeah, that's a dependency track. But is it again? It's a dashboard for one purpose.
Okay. I just saw one extra question pop up after that. How do you set up a security champion learning path, a tribe around it, and how to make people enthusiastic for it? Well, gamification, I think.
Talk to HR.
Yeah.
Because people forget, we think, oh, we have to fix it. No, we need to have a way for them because they are part of development. So they're not getting paid for being or they're going to get the bonus as a developer being a security champion. So you have to make it a role in your development environment.
Yeah.
And there are different initiatives, even in OWASP, about security champions. And in the Netherlands, we're looking also at that for a Dutch project, but there's also the OWASP. It's not called security champions or button project anymore, but how to do incentivize those security champions, because it's like an architect, and a software architect in the one company is not the same as a software architect in the other company. So what is a security champion differs. In my opinion, it should be those who not being shifted off left the security requirements, not doing the bad stuff, but it should be like the liaison for security to development, right?
Yeah. So the enthusiasm is preferably intrinsic, but then people also require, as Martin says, the enthusiasm for actually having the mandate to spend time on this.
True. Yeah.
And when you want to create one, talk to the developers, right? We can think about, oh, we need a security champion and developers. Who is a point volunteer? No, you have to make them enthusiasts first. And whatever initiative you do, you need some William Wallace who goes in front of the league, says, free Scotland and run down the hills, right? And I heard that's not a good analogy because they all die, but they die free Scots.
Yeah.
But you need somebody, and when you have developers who care, you will have somebody who actually wants to lead them and help them. Let the developers find a security champion. It's not a security plan. You have to mentor them, not to create it.
Cool. I think you just got a thumbs up from Teun, the question, the person who posed the question. So there is a longer question for Martin from Mark Chang Singpang, if I pronounce the name correctly. For Martin at slide DevSecOps, who makes the architecture of the system? You say in dev you start coding. Who defines the application architecture and the overall system architecture?
Again, when you talk about internal development, it's different than we have project teams. So we talk now DevOps teams, so we talk internal development. So you have to have your outlines. I remember that when I was once in the customer, they said, oh, it's agile, it can be everything. I say, no, even in agile, your bicycle shop will not be a bakery tomorrow, right? You have to have your fundament right. And that's the same with technology choices. And you do it, yes, as architects normally, those say, which is my target environment. So you have to talk to the operations guys. So if you go for Azure, I don't start using AWS technology, right? So you have your outline, your context. So it's a natural ingredient. Yeah, so you have to limit it. With lots of multiple applications. Yeah, still have to make choices. As I said with Bezos, you can choose, freely choose between the one or the other, and not between 50.
Yeah, or even if we go further back, you can choose black or black with Ford. Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting one. I think that ties into the question that Teun asked. How to magically transform functional testers to test automators or security testers. Actually, a lot can be covered with normal testing, though there is a lot of ground to win. It's more like a remark, but yeah. How do you transform people?
A tester to security test automation is different, because I think that's I almost would say the new type of test, right? really tester who sits there and tests the timeout with a stopwatch, hits a button and does 30 seconds and hits again. No, it's not these days anymore. So we will all more and more be test automation. That's the way to go. Otherwise, you cannot handle and be flexible and do the velocity of teams, right?
True. Yeah.
I think if I would have to choose, I'd rather have a security-aware developer than a software development-aware security guy, because I can teach a developer security, but I cannot teach the security guy's development.
No, true. You think the same way, Rob, or?
When we look at the typical tester, if there is one, with let's say yeah.
Let's call her Tina the tester.
Tina tester. Tina can present the system with prepared abuse cases, of course, and she can also learn how to automate them by scripting these cases. But at the other end of the spectrum is the really creative application of tricks and tools, actually manual penetration testing. That requires vast experience and knowledge, and it depends on the affinity and the experience of the tester, whether he or she can learn this. And one of the key talents that are necessary is what I call the attacker mindset. So it's the talent to be an attacker, and definitely there are many typical testers out there that can learn this, but it requires a lot of time.
Yeah, okay, so can only imagine. Rob, do you know good tools to manage this library of acceptance criteria? There are requirements engineering tools, of course, but many are very dated. But what for acceptance criteria? Also consider integrations with popular DevOps teams like GitLab, Azure DevOps, and GitHub. Yeah. By the way, GitHub is down.
What?
It said here. Yeah. I don't know if it's already back up online, but
I need to make some calls.
People were chatting about it.
All right. Now I'm a bit distracted, but no, it's a great question. Yeah. So this is bleeding edge, and which makes it really cool. The way we solve it generally is we map the triggers and the requirements on a tool that organizations typically use for accessing knowledge, which is mostly wiki.
Yeah. They
use the wiki to get access to the triggers, to the right instructions and tests, and they basically copy paste it into their tickets in Jira, for example. That's a way if you don't have a tool, but it nicely integrates in the existing infrastructure. But it definitely is. This is a blue ocean, I would say.
Yeah.
What about Security Red, the OWASP security requirements automation tool? And we have OWASP SKF, that actually is developed by two Dutch brothers. That actually has a checklist where you can do the OWASP ASVS or another one if you want, and you can do requirements per your sprints by functionality. They have the OWASP Security Knowledge Framework, SKF. Pretty cool.
Tool to implement. Yes, thank you. Trying to catch up with some of the questions if we still have a few open, because we are also nearing the end of the webinar. Okay, yes, Elchin, I saw your remark. Let me see. Oh, we still have a couple. Oh, no, that's my old deck. Sorry, so many questions.
We have to come back?
No. You hear developers say that they want all controls in code, so automation, which are tools, I guess. What's your view on this to the tool gap, to Rob? Yes, and you must come back, Martin. Thank you, Henk. Rob too, by the way. I think this is a chapter or a subject that is not covered yet completely. So
I need to parse this question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, you hear developers say that they want all the controls in code, so automation, which are tools, I guess. What is your view on this to the tool gap?
I don't understand the question. Maybe Martin does.
I think that, you cannot solve everything with the tool. I think the tool gap can be either the gap between two tools when you secure them. It's like the overlap, the correlation between the SARS and DARS tool, for example. And I think the manual thing. I think that's every tool you use, you will still, as I said, you want to have all of them, but they cost money, but they're also free. Like OWASP has OWASP sub-proxy. There's a very highly automatable dynamic application security testing tool. Tools don't solve everything need. Yeah, I think that's the thing. So yes, but you cannot solely rely on tools, right? A fool with a tool is still a fool. A tool with a fool is still a tool. So yes, they can only find technical problem, but they will never find everything. So you need more tools to find more, to cover more. And I think Gary McGraw said it again about his flaws and bugs. And he said, when you have 100% of the tools you use, you can only find about 50% from all the security issues because you cannot find vulnerabilities that are flaws. So functional faults, you will find by a tool. And then you don't have all the tools, so you go down, you have like 1 or 2 tools, and then you will find maybe 20% of all security issues. That's what I meant by the tools are there to find the low-hanging fruit. So tools are there, you have mandatory. It's a minimum level of quality. And then you have the freed human resources you have to find the more harder, the multi-stage security issues, right?
Short question. Is DevSecOps a thing, or is it just DevOps done the proper way? Hey, that's nice.
I would say that the S in DevOps stands for security.
Yeah, DevSecOps. Yeah, Dev security, the development security operations a thing, or is development operations done properly? Wow. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, it's. I said I put it like this: the sec should be there to put emphasis on. So you develop source code, and when you put emphasis on, you have to name it. It was also the question: sec, DevOps, sec, DevSecOps. Yeah. I don't care as long as you write secure code, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay. So it is. Let's do it in the proper way, and then it is both the same thing.
If I may, Björn, I noticed the question, do your recommendations also apply in low-code applications such as Mendix, IBM FSB?
Yeah,
and
that was indeed one.
My answer would be yes, they do. It is programming either way. We help many organizations doing low-code with software quality, including security. Even many low-code systems also have open source dependencies, for example. So
it's written by humans.
Still humans. Yep.
Yeah. So yes, you will not make the new mistakes, maybe because there's one. It's the component thing. Like I have remember people looked into it. The more we had the same with what is it called? WordPress. Everybody was starting this bad. The WordPress by itself is secure, but it's the plugins you have. So you have low code, it's perfect. Maybe. But then you have this, I want to be able to change that as well. And then you introduce a new area where I can make mistakes, right?
Yeah. Oh, I like Henk says here, security is like the LGBT thing. It should go without saying, but as it does not, we need positive discrimination until it goes without saying. Well, it's also a way of it. Yeah.
If you want to stay like this, yes, you have to make it clear. Yeah, everyone has the same rights. So sometimes you have to.
So first it needs to be dealt with as something exclusive, and then it will be inclusive, or it should then be treated as inclusive.
It should be put an emphasis on it.
Yeah.
It's not inclusive. You have to make aware by being out loud about it. Yeah.
Okay.
It becomes normal.
Yeah. I'm trying to go through everything that I copied and pasted from chat and Q&A, and so much.
There's one about the ASVS, and they asked that ASVS level 1 still ask if it's fully testable by tools. A good way to start. Again, ASVS is when you have 4 levels of 0 to 3. Security gradation. It's not a standard body. You cannot be always top 10 certified, not over some certified, and not over AWS certified. But it's about the first thing you do is to have quality tools in place. So the first thing you start with is quality and quality verification, because you have a proven quality. For AWS 0, you do nothing, right? So for AWS 1, at least you have some basic tools. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Still things open. Any recommendation? No, that is already answered. How do you balance securing software with keeping it usable? That one to supply chain, third party. Yes.
I think you got them all, Björn.
Yeah. You know what I think, or what I find right now. Normally, it's quite difficult to get people to ask questions, because in most situations where we either have webinars or events, you need a couple of questions to get people ask questions. And but right now we had already a huge list of people posting questions, so I'm really happy about that. It goes without saying that this makes it an interactive webinar. So not only Martin and Rob, thank you for participating, but also the audience in participating in the discussion, because otherwise it would be presentation and that's it. With that, we can stretch it many minutes. Oh, sorry. Yes, Martin.
One thing in own, the thing, almost everything is free. We have a local event, the almost Benelux Day, and it will be the 31st of March for the training day, and the 1st of April, for the joke, in Kortrijk in Belgium. So almost Benelux Day. So be welcome. It's a free
Belgium
event.
Can we reach it without being held back at the border, or?
It's in April, so you don't know where the measures by then.
No,
but then the Benelux
exactly.
Day is an annual event, and the last Thursday and Friday of November, from my head, is the 26th and 27th. I'm not sure. It will be in the Netherlands.
Cool, awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, given by the number of questions that we got, really this is an interesting subject to talk about, and people were interested because we started with a little over 200 participants and we ended with 172 right now, and some of them excused themselves because dinner was shouting. So with
That's
that,
amazing.
Yeah. And it is barely over 9 o'clock. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, your effort, your input, and sharing the knowledge with this wider audience. Again, the slides will be shared on the website. The recording, after it's done, will be downloaded, edited, clipped, pasted, polished, what have you, and uploaded to YouTube. And I think we will update everyone through email on this, or at least it's on the website. For those who registered with their ISC square number, that's one very big important remark that I forgot to mention. You will be handed a couple of CPs for this. We will do the assignment of these points, so we will do that. It will take a couple of weeks though, not because we are slow, but because the ISC Square organization is quite slow in adding those points. So it will be handled. If not after 2 weeks, then please send one email to events@chapter.iscsquare.nl, please, and then we will follow up. With that, I think I'm going to close the webinar. Again, Martin and Rob, thank you for your knowledge and your interesting presentations. And for the audience, thank you, and hope to see you on our next event.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure.